protesters have declared victory in North Dakota. Where will relations head next with the incoming Trump presidency? Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi's constitutional referendum has failed. We'll break that down. And finally, it has been months since the news broke in Flint. Many are still looking for answers. A closer look at why they've been ignored coming up later on. This is Talking Points. Welcome to the December 8th edition of Talking Points. I'm your host, Alex Amico. We begin tonight with the top stories of the week. The National Center for Transgender Equality found that over 60% of transgender Americans have avoided public bathrooms. Of over 27,000 participants, 12% also claimed they were verbally abused, 9% were denied access, and 1% were sexually assaulted. The survey is released at a time of uncertainty for transgender Americans. Although the Obama administration has moved transgender rights forward, some fear these initiatives may be slowed or stopped entirely due to the new administration. The International Union of Conservation of Nature has announced that giraffes face a high risk of extinction. The species jumped from a status of least concern to vulnerable. Nearly 40% of all giraffes were lost in the last 30 years alone, falling from a population of 157,000 to just 97,000. Despite this, numbers of West African giraffes have actually seen a slight increase since the 1990s. President-elect Donald Trump has announced plans to nominate Scott Pruitt to head the EPA. Pruitt is the Attorney General of Oklahoma, a gas and oil-intensive state. He's also written that the debate on climate change is far from settled and boasts that he is a leading opponent of EPA's agenda. The nomination highlights the president-elect's viewpoints on the environment and signals an opposition to Obama's legacy. Republican lawmakers hope to ban abortions after 20 weeks under a developing bill in Ohio. The bill would also prohibit most abortions after the first detected heartbeat, which comes as early as 6 weeks. The House Community and Family Advancement Committee voted Wednesday night to pass the ban. The bill will now be headed to the full House for consideration and has been called one of the nation's most stringent abortion restrictions. Ohio Governor John Kasich has not said whether he plans to sign any measures. Construction on the Dakota Access Pipeline has stopped once again, and this time it may be for good. On Sunday, the Army Corps of Engineers denied an easement to complete the nearly 1,200-foot-long pipeline. The decision was hailed as a victory by demonstrators who opposed the pipeline, saying that it could threaten drinking water for the Standing Rock Sioux tribe and has damaged sacred land. Now, Energy Transfer Partners, the company building the pipeline, must consider alternate routes around Lake Oahe and complete an environmental impact statement. Here to discuss this development and its historical implications is political correspondent Josh Carney and national correspondent Sarah Nevin. Guys, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
So, the easement's been denied, construction's been halted, but protesters aren't leaving the campsites yet. Why is that?
Well, it's because this decision isn't an outright ban to finish completing the pipeline and building the final 1,000 feet under Lake Oahe. Instead, it's kind of just a requirement that an environmental impact statement has to be completed before a permit can even be considered to be granted. So basically, if the court finds that an environmental risk is that the pipeline doesn't pose an environmental risk, then Energy Transfer Partners could resume construction. But if it does pose a risk, then they would have to implement an alternative route. Now, since this decision can take up to a year to complete, they do have to consider alternative routes now and propose them. However, the company has released a statement saying that they don't really intend to. That statement says they fully expect to complete construction of the pipeline without any additional rerouting in and around Lake Oahe. Nothing this administration has done today changes that in any way.
Now, speaking of that, what this administration has done, the decision was criticized by some as a political one. Someone said that President Obama, the Midwest Alliance for Infrastructure, said that President Obama is trying to cement his legacy with left-wing environmentalists. What are the implications of the fact that this decision was made, but President Obama actually hasn't talked about it yet?
It's not inherently political, but the point being is that moving forward, it will become a political game. While the Trump administration can roll back this initiative, it doesn't mean that it's going away anytime soon. The problem is, President Obama is making a lot of last-minute plays to preserve land and protect the environment. But with the nomination of Pruitt for the head of the EPA, we can see that there are going to be a lot of rollbacks in the upcoming administration.
Now, one thing that's been in the news in the last week is President-elect Trump's possible conflicts of interest in terms of places he's had investments in. One company he's had investments in is actually the one constructing the Dakota Access Pipeline. What are the implications of that?
Yeah, so there's definitely worry that Donald Trump could overturn this decision. However, it would be a very, very difficult process. He could potentially work with Congress to pass legislation that would protect this pipeline, which would be easier with a Republican Congress, but there would still be a lot of public backlash. Going directly to the Army Corps to ask them to overturn the decision would also be kind of ethically challenging because they've already come out saying they want this this environmental impact statement to happen. And so if they overturn that decision, they could face lawsuits from the Sioux tribe potentially. And so the safest decision for Trump really is to just wait and see what comes of this court decision after this environmental statement is completed.
Now, Josh, some might say that this denial of the easement is a bright spot in what's otherwise been historically not so great relations between Native American tribes and the United States government. What does the future look like for those relations?
Well, up to this point, we've seen the political clout of Native American tribes increase quite a bit. Whether it's Washington, Wyoming, or in South Dakota and even North Dakota, there has been a substantial amount of protests and movements to ban projects related to infrastructure, oil, and natural gas on Native American land. So it is a progressive sort of action and will definitely benefit relations moving forward, but it's hard-pressed to see if the Trump presidency will have better relations than the Obama administration did, which isn't really setting a high bar. The disenfranchisement is inherent and it will persist. The problem is, where is that line? The line is currently blurred if you're waiting for a lawsuit from these tribes, but you're also trying to create a stopgap initiative to get around so you can continue to build the pipeline. So it has to pass through the political implications for the environment before it can pass through the political implications for the Native American tribes.
Well, as we said, with protesters still camping out in freezing weather in North Dakota, this issue is not going away. Guys, thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Alex.
Coming up after the break, the latest on President-elect Trump, his foreign policy plans, and the new investment deals he has brokered. Stay with us.
Here we go. We're going to go out there in the rain. You're going to get wet. All right, here we go. Okay, quick. Oh, yeah, yes. So much fun. Mwah. We're getting so wet.
Look at you. You're at the top of your game. You're unstoppable. Nothing can throw you off track. Wait, is that your car? Uh-oh. Yeah, I saw that coming. That will throw you off track. You're looking at around 10 grand in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. Let's try this again. Smart move. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Donald Trump announced yesterday that General John Kelly would be his new Homeland Security chief and that Iowa Governor Terry Branstad would be the new ambassador to China. Trump has come under fire recently for some questionable foreign policy decisions that have left some diplomats worried. Here to talk about how his foreign policy may shape up is Talking Points election correspondent Dan Prager. Dan, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having
me.
me.
Let's start with talking about these recent foreign policy picks. We're still waiting on the Secretary of State, but we have the Department of Homeland Security, General Kelly, and the ambassador to China, Terry Branstad. What do those say about the new administration?
So Kelly is actually a pretty nonpartisan pick, which is something that many people didn't expect for Trump, especially out of Homeland Security. He said before he would work in a Clinton or a Trump administration. He didn't support either candidate. He won't release who he voted for. So it's a nonpartisan pick. He is a little more conservative than liberal. He opposed Obama's choice to close Guantanamo.
But given that some of the other options were Chris Kobach, who's sort of a darling of the conservative movement,
He was definitely a moderate, nonpartisan
Rudy Giuliani,
choice.
This is definitely more middle of the road, right?
Definitely. And Branstad actually has a very close relationship with China. It's a very good pick. Iowa and China are actually major trading partners. Him and President Xi from China are actually very close friends. So it's a good pick to improve relations with a country where Trump has had a couple of controversies, especially over the past week.
Right. So in mentioning that, this is a good pick to sort of help with ties to China, picking someone who's so close with the Chinese president. But Trump sort of made a bit, what some might say was a diplomatic error earlier this week with his phone call to the recently elected Taiwanese president. What was that all about?
So Trump basically got a phone call. He said he received a phone call, but other people say he called the Taiwanese prime minister or president. And that really throws a wrench into relations with China. They go under a one China policy, which basically says that China owns Taiwan. Taiwan is a province of China that's kind of rogue. And if Trump is calling the Taiwanese leader, it's kind of signaling that he is going to have relations with them, and it really annoys Beijing. Trump put out a bunch of tweets about it, saying that basically, did China ask when they devalued currency and things like that. So some people are actually wondering, oh, did he do this on purpose to try and aggravate China and show him there's new leadership, there's strong leadership? But a lot of other people think, oh, Trump might have just made a diplomatic error in something he didn't know. We're not really sure.
It's worth saying that a lot of people have actually praised the call as standing up to China.
A lot of conservatives are very happy
But
about it.
in a nutshell, with these recent picks and with these recent diplomatic phone calls and the possible upcoming Secretary of State pick, what is Trump's foreign policy going to look like?
It's actually a relatively moderate, except for maybe Flynn, who has called Islam a cancer and has a couple of problems. He might not even get confirmed depending on whether or not the Senate confirms him. But it's a pretty moderate, nonpartisan. He picked a lot of generals, which in the campaign he said he knew more than the generals did. They're going to be anti-Iran, they're going to be pro-Guantanamo, and they're going to have a more conservative approach to foreign policy. But it's a pretty moderate one, and one that we might not have expected from campaign Trump.
Well, one way or another, it's certainly going to be a shift from the last 8 years.
Definitely.
Dan, thank you for joining us. Over the past week, President-elect Donald Trump has made several headlines regarding U.S. deals with corporations, both good and bad. These have included the announcement of a carrier factory in Indiana remaining open, a $50 billion investment by Japanese telecom firm SoftBank, and tweets regarding Boeing's current deal to build a new Air Force One. Here to further discuss the effects of these deals and tweets is Talking Points contributor Thomas Viola. Tom, thank you for joining us. So let's start with the direct impacts of some of the actions that President-elect Trump has actually taken over the last week. What have been some of those?
Well, we've seen his tweet about Boeing saying that they're going to renegotiate the Air Force One deal caused a slight drop in Boeing's stock, as that would be a significant loss of revenue for them. We've also seen increases in the shares in the Japanese market of SoftBank, as well as Sprint and T-Mobile, because SoftBank has been investing heavily in T-Mobile, and Sprint has been seen as a partner for a potential merger for them.
So overall, among the business community and the political community, what's been the reaction of them to some of these actions?
Well, Republicans right now are pretty much praising Trump. He's very much going with the popular moves right now. He's picking headlines.
Some are sort of criticizing the carrier deal, though.
Some are, but more of them aren't, due to the fact simply Ted Cruz, for example, was praising the deal. The ones that aren't are in the right here. There's somewhat of a halo effect about Trump right now, since he just won. But the reality is, if this was Obama or Clinton or Bernie Sanders making these announcements, Republicans would probably be railing against them as crony capitalism and Trump picking winners.
So one thing that's sort of been, with President Trump's long business history, his personal holdings in companies, there have been some issues. There have been some criticism over Ivanka's dealing with the Japanese company that the deal was recently announced with. What sort of effect is that going to have on the incoming administration?
Well, it's really tough to say at this point. There's a report now that Trump sold all of his personal stakes in companies back in June, but it's unclear exactly how much that really removes him from things. We also have to see whether or not he does eventually agree to a blind trust, or if he still hands over full power to his children, because that could create some conflicts of interest.
And last question, you have just graduated. This is your last Talking Points with us. What are your final thoughts?
I'd have to say my final thoughts are that it has been an absolute wonderful experience. My year and a half plus here have been nothing short of fantastic. I've made some amazing friends. I've met some wonderful people, and I'm going to miss you all very dearly.
We're going to miss you too, Tom. Thank you for everything you've done over the last year and a half. Thanks for joining us. On the other side of the break, a closer look at Italy's failed constitutional referendum. Don't go anywhere.
This is the story of a boy who didn't talk for a long time. The boy liked things to always be the same. Any changes would scare and upset him. The unknown was an unfriendly place. The boy was very sensitive to lights and sounds. So he built secret hiding places where they couldn't get in. The boy didn't like looking people in the eye. He wasn't trying to be mean, it just made him feel uncomfortable. Sometimes he'll flap his arms again and again.
One day, I found out I have something called autism. My family got me help. Slowly, I found my voice and learned all the ways I could live with it better.
Early intervention can make a lifetime of difference. Learn the signs at autismspeaks.org.
This past Sunday, millions of Italians voted on a constitutional referendum that would potentially change the political landscape for years to come. However, following a pattern of recent European authoritarian populism, the referendum lost by a resounding margin. With the loss to his own proposal, Prime Minister Matteo Renzi resigned yesterday, and Talking Points contributor Josh Feinblatt joins us now with more.
Hey, Alex. Although he's being asked to stay at least until 2017, Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi resigned yesterday after his referendum did not pass, saying, quote, "I did all I could to bring this to victory. If you fight for an idea, you cannot lose." The referendum's goal was to streamline the legislative process and modernize the very unique political system in Italy. But about 60% of Italian voters voted against the referendum to stop Renzi's goal of restarting the stagnant Italian economy. 70% of those voters who were under the age of 35 ended up voting against it. And it's odd because, as we've seen in the rest of Europe and America too, the young vote seemed to be overwhelmingly liberal, but that's not what happened in Italy. The problem with Italy's government is that it's got too much gridlock, and this mainly comes from its perfect government, meaning the two chambers of Congress have exactly the same amount of power. There are currently 950 seats in the Italian legislature, and Renzi's referendum would have decreased the 315 Senate members down to only 100. This would have shifted the power over to the House of Deputies, which is similar to our House of Representatives, who would be free to pass day-to-day bills much easier. The Italian legislature voted for the changes earlier in the year, but did not garner a two-thirds majority of support, resulting in it being called to a referendum. President Obama wanted Prime Minister Renzi to stay on regardless of the outcome, Italian President Sergio Mattarella is asking Renzi to stay on at least until the 2017 budget passes, which could be pretty soon. Many voters turned to the referendum into a vote about whether they wanted Renzi to remain the prime minister and not about the referendum's topic. When Renzi does end up stepping down, President Mattarella will either form a caretaker government until the 2018 election or call for early elections. Economic growth has been on the decline in the past 3 years, and while you think that the people who would want to change their unproductive system of government, it seems that they just want new leadership. And ciao, Alex, for the last time from me to you, now back to you.
Thanks, Josh. Over the past few weeks, there's been an exodus of people fleeing the Rakhine state of Myanmar. The Rohingya people are a small Muslim minority in Myanmar that a UN spokeswoman in 2009 described as the world's most friendless people. Here with more on the renewed persecution of the Rohingya is Talking Points international correspondent Elijah Sharma. Elijah, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, obviously this has been a problem that's been ongoing. They were called the world's most friendless people back in 2009. But what's behind this most recent exodus?
This recent exodus we're really seeing is because there was kind of an attack by 9 Rohingya men who attacked kind of a military police checkpoint. And that's kind of sparked really harsh government crackdown. We're not actually sure how harsh because reporters aren't being let into the scene. But this has caused these massive fleeing from the country. They're saying that the government is burning houses, killing indiscriminately, and just kind of really just using this as an excuse for ethnic cleansing.
Now, one of the leaders of Myanmar is Nobel Peace Prize winner Aung San Suu Kyi. What sort of changes has she made to help the Rohingya people?
Really, she can't do much because the thing is, in Myanmar's constitution, the military still has say over many of the major ministries and just major government institutions. So her hands are kind of tied, and she's not necessarily sure if it's a fight that's worth the political capital. She has started an investigation, but the investigation's been seen by many as kind of illegitimate because the vice president and the former chief of police are taking part in that investigation.
And now anytime there's an event like this, like we see in Syria, anytime there's a mass persecution of a people that leads to them fleeing, there's always going to be a reaction from neighboring countries who often have to bear the brunt of that exodus. What have Myanmar's neighbors been saying?
Myanmar's neighbors are kind of 50-50. You have Bangladesh, who has taken a lot of these Rohingya people over the years. When people flee Myanmar, they go to Bangladesh, these people, and Bangladesh's economy is already struggling. They really can't take too many more people. Malaysia, on the other hand, has struck a pretty bellicose tone. They said, we need you to stop. We call this ethnic cleansing. We need you to stop right now. So Malaysia has really kind of gone after Myanmar over these reports, over kind of any sort of incident of violence.
Now, when we're talking about sort of humanitarian crises that have garnered international attention over the last year, we think Syria and to a lesser extent Yemen and a little bit of Nigeria with Boko Haram.
Yeah.
We haven't really heard much about this. What are international organizations doing about just this awful crisis?
They're trying to raise awareness about it. The UN former Secretary for Human Rights, has gone in and is really trying to pressure international aid to kind of help these people in getting the violence to stop. But there's really not much people can do. And like was said in the tease, these are friendless people. They haven't had really any friends for a long time, and it's kind of unlikely that they're going to start having them now.
It's just a heartbreaking development in the world these days. Elijah, thanks as always for reporting on it. When we come back, Flint, Michigan still has problems, but they have fallen out of the news. We'll take a look back.
I see you mobbing over her. Let's go. Let's mob. Let's crawl. Let's crawl. Let's crawl. Hey, yo, we mobbing. Come on, girl. Let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl. Hey, let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl.
Hey, look, it's those guys. Are you good to drive?
I'm fine.
How many did you have?
I should be fine.
You should be.
Go and step out of the vehicle for me.
See ya, buddy. Good luck. So turns out, buzz driving and drunk driving, they're the same thing, and it costs around $10,000. So not worth it.
On April 25th, 2014, the city of Flint, Michigan began using the Flint River as its water source. As we all know, residents soon began to complain about the color and taste of the water. Within months, boil water advisories were issued because of E. coli in the water, and things only got worse from there. Genesee County, where Flint is located, experienced an increase in Legionnaire's disease that resulted in 12 deaths. On January 16th of this year, President Obama signed an emergency declaration for Flint. As our last segment of the year, it's only fitting that we end with Flint, where questions are still being asked and residents are still lacking clean water. Here to take a closer look at the crisis that has lost much of its national coverage is Talking Points contributor Joey Lino. Joey, thank you for joining us. So, since this news broke, the boil water advisory came in. How have residents of Flint been actually getting their water?
Well, for a couple years now, the residents of Flint have been using water filters and bottled water for all of their everyday water needs. And while this has been effective for some, a lot of people, well, first of all, the water filters will only, for the most part, work in your kitchen sink, so you don't really have clean water in your bathrooms. And then for a lot of older homes, the filters don't even fit the sinks, and so it's a particularly poorer and more marginalized people who are struggling with this the worst, and the filters aren't getting to them.
So this is one of the, I'll be honest, this is one of the worst things that's happened in this country to a community in several years. Who's responsible for this, and why have they not been held accountable?
As horrible as it is, an independent commission has found that the state of Michigan is largely responsible at all levels of government. The Michigan Department of Environmental Quality has definitely seen a couple heads roll. Multiple public officials have resigned or been fired.
But Governor Snyder's still in office.
Governor Snyder is still in office despite, well, he says he wasn't aware until very late in the timeline of events that anything was wrong, yet somehow his whole administration was aware of the events up to that point.
So that's looking back at why people haven't been held accountable. Looking right now, people are still having to boil water, but has there been any improvement at all in the water in Flint?
Well, actually, there is some good news on that count. A professor from Virginia Tech who found the initial results of lead in the water has been doing independent testing and found that the percentage of homes with lead poisoning has dropped, and the bacteria that's causing Legionnaire's disease has dropped as well. However, it's a lot of the more marginalized people and the poorer people who need the help the most are the ones that are still affected by this crisis.
So full disclosure, 2 summers ago I worked for the congressman who represented Flint, Dan Kildee. He's been very outspoken on this issue. He's never really let it get out of his sight pretty much. He's been very outspoken on this. The national media really hasn't. Why has national coverage of this crisis gone down so much?
Well, really, it's been a long time. It's been unfolding over a long period of time, and it's just not mainstream news anymore. However, how the House just approved more funding to aid Flint, and it's expected to pass the Senate in the next couple days. And a group of veterans who were protesting at Standing Rock have decided to move their attentions to Flint and focus their attentions there. So hopefully, they'll get some more national coverage in the coming months.
Well, hopefully that money does some good, because this is a real problem with very big consequences. Joey, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Alex.
Finally, this is my last time hosting Talking Points. This show has always had a special place in my heart because it was my introduction to broadcast journalism at Syracuse. When I was an 18-year-old freshman, I got bit by the politics bug in my first class, so I started writing for this show. I blogged about the Virginia and New Jersey governor races in 2013, and the next semester I was lucky enough to get a shot at being on air. Since then, I've been able to do what I love every Thursday night at 7:30. I love this show for two reasons. The first reason I love this show is because of the people that do it. In a year of hosting this show, not a week goes by where I'm not dazzled by the knowledge and preparation of our correspondents and producers. It's doubly impressive when you consider that most of them are freshmen, sophomores, and juniors. I couldn't be more encouraged by the cast we're leaving behind. The second is because I love politics. I know just saying the word can leave a bad taste in people's mouths. I'm the first to admit there are some unsavory aspects to it. People think it's corrupt, it's futile, it encompasses all the worst parts of human condition. But when you boil it down, politics is about ideas, and more importantly, it's about people. That's why I love it. While reporting this summer in rural Alabama, I saw the real effect that politics has on real people. I met a civil rights activist in Lowndes County named John Jackson. He was a big, tough man with a raspy voice and a few missing teeth. He told us all about his town's abject poverty during segregation, told me about his friends of his during the civil rights movement who were killed for trying to register to vote, and then he told us about how he cried when President Obama was inaugurated. He said he felt like his life's goal had been achieved. Even the largest political events and political decisions have a deep impact on individuals. Beyond statistics and numbers in a budget report, there are real people, real lives, real hopes and dreams. That's something I hope we never lose sight of. I want to leave you with this. We're gazing into an uncertain future. Winds of change are blustering stronger than ever in our country. It's intimidating and exciting. For some people, it's discouraging and frightening. But I hope that in days both bright and dark, we can all keep our spirit, never giving up, never giving in, and fervently pushing forward toward a brighter future that we all desire, regardless of our political preference. I may be a bit of an idealist, but I can promise you we can do great things, and I've never been more optimistic that we will. I want to thank everyone that I've worked with on Talking Points for their guidance and leadership. Alex Garofalo, Anna Giles, Nick Cardona, Max Darrow, Claire Moran, and Mike Riccardi. We wouldn't have been able to do the show we did for the last year without all your help over the last 4. I'm grateful that I got the chance to share this desk and this newsroom with such a talented group over the last year. That's all the time we have for tonight and the rest of the semester. Thank you for watching all year long. Make sure to tune in when we come back in January. For Talking Points one last time, I'm Alex Amico. Happy holidays, Syracuse.